Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first ever virtual edition of the Writers Guild. My name is Lauren Tilley, and I am the Program and Research Librarian at the Orangeville Public Library. The library is pleased to be offering tonight's entertainment in partnership with our local Headwaters Writers Guild. Typically, this event is held annually in the spring, but due to extenuating circumstances with the global pandemic, things didn't happen in person in April, and we've decided to continue virtually and finish it in 2020. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers for this evening, and I hope everyone enjoys. But before we get started, I want to introduce our Master of Ceremonies for tonight, and that's Harry Posner. So Harry is the author of 6 books, including poetry, flash fiction, novels, and 2 spoken word CDs. For those of you who have not heard Harry's spoken word poetry, you are in for a treat. Harry is Orangeville Public Library's own word wizard. He's a member of the Headwaters Writers Guild and Dufferin County's first poet laureate. He has brought our community for Orangeville's first ever poetry festival, the Day of the Poets. Without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Harry, to get us started and introduce our speakers.
Very good. Thank you, Lauren. Lovely introduction as usual. And thank you, everyone, for all of our readers for coming along to our first ever virtual WOW, Words the Orangeville Way event. Along with how many million people, Lauren, have registered to listen in? Quite a few.
Like 7 million. Roughly.
At least 7 million. So that's a lot. It's 14 million ears. And, you know, our words need ears and our ears need words. So it's a perfect combination. And so thank you, everyone, for jumping into this fun event tonight. There's going to be poetry and prose, which is great, a nice mix. We have, count them, 4 poets laureate. 4 poets laureate in one room, so to speak, which is a record. Add in a town crier. Now, Andrew Welch is also missing. Lauren?
I believe Andrew is here. He was here earlier.
Oh, okay, great. So yes, 4 poets laureate and a town crier, all in one room. So that's a world record, I think. Before I introduce our first reader, Marilyn Kleiber, I'm going to share a quick poem with you just to kick things off, so to speak, and have some fun. This poem is about, it's about a relationship, let's put it that way. And it goes something like this. Something about the mosh pit toughness of moths, or maybe the tender coy blushing of venerated butterflies. Something about the gypsy slam dancing with lamp posts, or maybe the monarch flushed with regal pomp and glitter. Something about the alkaloid cravings of garden tigers, or maybe the admiral marshalling a troop of black-eyed Susans. Can a moth mate with a butterfly and survive its precious nature? Can a butterfly withstand the moth's lack of style? Something about your firm grasp of light and death, or maybe my unforgivable ignorance of pistils and stamens. Something about your willingness to eat a leaf with gusto, or maybe my pollen-smeared tongue as social embarrassment. Something about sweaters made holy through hunger, or maybe the joy of flutter and nets and children with boards and pins. All right, our first presenter tonight is Marilyn Kleiber. Now, Marilyn Kleiber, a prize-winning author with the published short story collection who is currently writing under the pen name of J.M. Tibbet, is in the process of writing a 7-book myth/fantasy series, of which Book 1 has achieved Amazon bestseller status. Book 1, The Arrival, Book 2, The Healers, and Book 3, The Warriors, have all been published and are available on Amazon and in the Orange be published early in 2021. Marilyn offers to explain the reason for her pen name of J.M. Tibbet. Please take it away, Marilyn J.M. Tibbet Kleiber.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. The reason J.M. Tibbet came up is because I wanted initials, so no one would say, oh, that's a woman writer, we don't want to read her. Tibbet came from Granny, that was her maiden name, and the J.M. are just my initials reversed, very simple. Harry's told you mostly about me, but I'm going to just do a little summary quickly of the first two books. That was The Arrival and The Healers. And as he said, they're available on Amazon. My protagonist, Cat, and her guide, Mouse, are to travel throughout the world of Pridden on the behest of Lord Eduardo of Colman. Her assignment is to help him to discover those who are setting his world on a potential course of destruction. He promises to help her in return to return to her own world once she has given her help. So as we entering the third novel, the two travelers are coming to the land of Refella. Cat stopped her horse again. Does Morwenna live in the mountain like Grognor? Mouse paused beside her. No, she lives within her own keep, which is home to many of Refellan royalty. Please remember, Cat, when we are in her company, use Lord Morwenna's title. You've told me about titles often enough. You don't need to keep reminding me. It's like teaching a pig to sing. First of all, pigs can't sing, and secondly, you annoy the hell out of them. Mouse blinked rapidly at her. What are you talking about? Pigs cannot sing. You're correct, pigs can't sing. What I should say is you're annoying me so much with your constant reminders about protocol, I'm beginning to ignore your words. I suggest you allow me to be myself and only correct me when I make a mistake. Mouse hesitated. Cat, such an action would be appropriate, except when you make errors, they're quite substantial. So explain to them I'm not of this world, and I'm still learning about customs. I'm confident most will accept your words. I do wish you would all accept me as I am, because I am trying. Mouse sighed and rolled his eyes. Cat suddenly gasped. Why's my stone so icy cold? Without warning, a half a dozen creatures, each the size of a fox, sprang from the undergrowth and headed for them, grunting and growling. Move, Cat, fast! He swatted the pack horse on the back horse on the flank, and spurred his own animal forward, headed for the less bushy areas at the foothills of Clog Off. What are they? Cat called to him as they galloped towards the mountains. Mouse yelled back at her, Branters, and they run in packs and can bring down a full grown horse if slow enough. Keep riding. Cat rode, and the grunting noises became fainter as the three horses galloped for their lives. Silence reigned. Did we outrun them? She slowed her mount. I think so, Mouse began. Uh-oh. He rolled over to the pack horse, where, clinging by its teeth to a sack frame from which on the horse's back hung an animal with tufts of black fur on its head, surrounded by two small horns. Each foot sported two massive claws, perfect for disemboweling prey. Cat gasped at the size of the claws. No wonder Mouse urged me to move fast. He raised his dagger and plunged the point into the neck of the animal. Blood gushed from the wound, and the gross-looking creature tumbled to the ground. This one got caught in the sacking and couldn't free itself. The teeth tell you they are formidable creatures. It's fortunate their legs are so short, as they experience difficulty keeping up with animals who can run faster. But what they lose in speed, they make up for in stamina. Their quarry almost always collapses from exhaustion and fall victim to the foul creatures. Cat gazed closer and shuddered. The animal, covered in leathery skin similar to an elephant, possessed a repulsive face. Bulbous, bloodshot eyes, surrounded by black hair and the horns that Cat glimpsed as the animal hung from the sacking, gave the appearance of a near-sighted Satan. All this sat atop a yellow snout, from which dripped a viscous green fluid. The teeth, which Mouse so kindly pointed out as formidable, shone midnight black and provided a sharp contrast with the yellow interior of the mouth. Is this one of the creatures I needed to shoot with my spring bow? Sorry, I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. That was wonderful. Thank you, Marilyn. Our next presenter, my partner in rhyme, my buddy from up in Owen Sound, Mr. Richard Sitoski. Now, Richard Eve Sitoski is the 2019 to 2021 Poet Laureate of Owen Sound. His latest book is No Sleep Till Eden, an augmented reality collection of poems on the environment. Richard Eve Sitoski, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Harry. Let's see here. How's my audio, by the way? I often have trouble with audio, so it's good? Great. Well, normally I'm a spoken word writer, but because COVID has pretty much put paid to that, I've been concentrating on page poems. And so this is a little bit of a different thing for me, or at least it hasn't been something that I've been doing for a while. Low-hanging fireworks. Mother counted a rosary of comets. Father dropped the earth and watched as it rolled beneath the couch. Her music was straight as a prairie road. His was bent like an elbow to the gut. He preferred the company of dogs, she of me when I felt like one. She arrived with ellipses, he with an interrobang. Together, they proved that entropy comes without a screenplay. She tried to bake with chocolate chips, but I always wound up with raisins. He taught me to fish, but each one I caught swallowed the hook. Some nights, he played heads like percussion instruments. Some days, her migraines were low-hanging fireworks. In his last days, he was a derelict house, the handle disintegrating when I tried the door. In hers, she was bare as a cathedral, if all that was holy within it had taken off and flown away. Thank you. A conversation with the moon. The moon rises dripping from her bath in the sea. The moon reassures me, yes, some ships keep sailing even after they've wrecked. The moon admits to being a low wattage bulb, a djembe with a torn head, a 45 RPM spindle adapter. But you see, she wants me to be wary of analogies. Don't liken me to a coin, she chides. And if a coin, I am the one in a tankard, press gang waiting by the door. Better yet, she says, I am your mother's beret on a hook, and the stars on the wall where your father caught himself whenever he stumbled, chasing her. And another poem about my parents, because it always revolves around that. Meteorology in 2 parts. 1. The house stood below a line of pines. Columns, reminders that empires have a shelf life. In it, a man dozed on a dusty rose sofa. Ozymandias half sculpted from a ledge of rock, the color of pink slips, morning storms, and a stripper's frosted lips. Feet Fentex slippered, he let the tabloid fall from his gut to the floor, snored his way through noonday, a cloud scudding bloated and gray. And part 2, quaked on nights that never rang with sirens. It was thunder and biblical rain on the woman who remained inside for 40 days. The Weather Channel blared, teaching her that sky was not a thing to contradict. She ventured out between the squalls to hang the laundry, blush-colored slip covers, socks ratty and gray. Her wet soles on the concrete flags left lingering prints. No sun to vanish them. They led back the way they came. And finally, the first poem I've ever written about happiness. The sun behind the clouds is a child, hidden in the drapes with feet in plain view. Happiness is manifest today. That couple, suffering each other on account of the kids, it bickers like gulls, and this rouses my smiles from their summer torpor. I feel no guilt. That's consigned to cults practiced by the sick. I repeat, nothing will eclipse my happiness today. That old man on the bench, he knows it. He reads hope in the tiger stripes, painted by that burning man Guinevere on his granddaughter's face, and he thinks back to his brush-cut youth where each new day was a bike you jumped on and rode till the tires blew. The little girl hands him her kite, a tame pterodactyl, then bolts to the monkey bars, weightless with laughter. Would he sell me the kite, I wonder? A storm is coming, and there's something I'm dying to try. And that's my time. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Rico. That was the most pessimistic, happy poem I've ever heard, but it's brilliant anyway. I love it.
Right?
All right, next up. On stage, on our virtual stage, is Diane Baiter. Now, Diane Baiter is the author of several mystery novels. She's a member of Crime Writers of Canada, Sisters in Crime Canada, and the Writers Union of Canada. When she's not writing, she works in a theater which may be subjected to immortality in a whole new series. No surprise, she's trying her hand at writing a play. Her books are available at Booklore and through her publisher at bookswelove.net. Please welcome Diane Baiter. Take it away.
Okay, there we go. Thanks a lot, Harry. I'm having technical glitches here. So what I wanted to read from tonight was one of my books from my Wild Blue Mystery series called The Bakery Lady. The Bakery Lady is actually the only Christmas book I've written so far, so I think I have to get on that. By the time Leo returned in the early afternoon, she had 3 walls of the gingerbread house erected with a bowl in the center to hold them up. He smiled his approval, then sat on the stool to watch. She ignored him and attached the 4th wall. After she put on the roof pieces, she stepped back to admire her handiwork. "Bravo," he applauded. "You've successfully incarcerated a defenseless bowl." "What are you talking about?" Her eyes widened. He grinned. "You left your bowl inside." "I did?" Christina's shoulders sagged as one side of the roof slid off to reveal the yellow bowl inside. The other side of the roof slid and dragged off a wall. Her eyes widened even more as the remaining 3 walls toppled. When she swore, Leo covered his mouth and convulsed with laughter. Christina couldn't stop the tears, nor did she bother. She was too frustrated. "I can't do this. I'm just going to go buy a stupid gingerbread house. There's no way I can make one by tomorrow." Leo grasped her arms and pulled her close, pressing her against his chest. She poured out every ounce of frustration in her tears, then looked at the ruins. "Why can't I do this? It's not that difficult, is it?" His arms remained firm around her. "What would your mom tell you?" She laid her head on his chest, the thumps of his heart calming her as she gazed at the mess of icing and cookie. "She would say I was too impatient and I need to let the walls set before I put on the roof. That and the icing's too thin." "Problem solved," Leo nodded. Oh, and you should stop giving away your bowls. Well, how else am I supposed to get 3 walls to stay up while I put on the 4th? He gazed into her eyes. Ask a friend for help? Christina looked up. She had never thought of that. I don't have any friends. Well, except Clancy, and he doesn't count. Well, I could be your friend. Leo touched her chin. She hesitated and licked her lips. Can you hold up the walls of a gingerbread house? Yeah, I can manage that. Are closing the gap between them. Can we call a truce? For now? Her heart hammered against his leather jacket. The heat that emanated off his body made her want to kiss him, to rip off his coat and... not one of her better ideas. Instead, she pulled away from him and scrubbed her hands at the sink. She thickened the icing while Leo scraped icing off the pieces of the house. Together, they stood the walls to make a solid base for the roof. When his hands brushed hers, her knees nearly buckled. Why are you helping me? Because you asked, Leo shrugged. Clancy's worried about you. Between you and me, I think you're kind of interesting. Her face warmed. Oh, gee, thanks. With his help, the gingerbread house took no time at all to finish. This time when Christina stood back to admire her work, the roof and the walls stayed in place. Leo draped an arm across her shoulders. Nice job. Lucy and the kids will love it. I'll put the rest of the icing in a tub and the candies in a bag. She grabbed the empty plastic container and a lid. Since we're actually friends now, I have a question. How well do you know Lucy? His gaze remained on the gingerbread house. Yeah, her husband tried to kill her, so after the dust settled, we all became good friends. How good? The question slipped out before Christina could stop it. Leo raised his eyebrows. You are jealous. She kept her eyes averted. Nope, just curious. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane Baiter. Pleasure as always hearing your mellifluous voice.
Ah,
And your cool murder mysteries. That brain of yours, I'm telling you. Next up is a very special guest, all the way from the city of Mississauga. Paul Edward Costa is a writer, a spoken word artist, teacher, and the 2019 to 2021 Poet Laureate of the city of Mississauga. He has featured at and curated many poetry reading series in the GTA and has published over 60 stories and poems in amateur or semi-pro literary journals. His first book of poetry, The Long Train of Chaos, by Kung Fu Treachery Press. I love that name. That's a great name for a press. Kung Fu Treachery Press. And his short fiction collection, Goddamned Avalon, is forthcoming from Mosaic Press. He has also won the Mississauga Arts Council's 2019 Marty Award for Emerging Literary Artists. Please take it away, Paul Edward Costa.
Thank you so much. Is everybody able to hear me okay? I'm trying a new kind of setup out.
Yep, we can hear you, Paul.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so I got 3 short poems for you. This first one was written during a workshop that I ran last month, which was a outdoor creative writing and hiking workshop that I ran as a Mississauga Poet Laureate at the Riverwood Conservancy in Mississauga. And here it is. These are from notes I made during that workshop. It's a gradual, organic invasion, emerging over broken bladed machines, over fields that no one ever photographed. You should leave and return when this place occurs to you by chance, if you want to not only see progress, but also recognize evidence of its reality. A web of branches straining to hold back crushing atmospheric noise, carried on sharp winds, snaking in like babbling gentle waves. Some stumbling upon the river find it magnificent, even mighty, In the absence of knowing how the trails and eroded shores where they wander sat beneath currents flowing high overhead. The ecosphere inverted, where what once ruled still hibernates on the other side. Much. This second poem was published in a journal called the Gyroscope Review. They published a text version of it as well as an audio version that I recorded for them, and so it's also available through the Gyroscope Review. It's called Magic Lamp Semantics. You will never hear sentences so elaborately and carefully constructed as the wishes now made to genies, so airtight, filled with dashes and semicolons, that they're immune to any cruel, ironic, Twilight Zone interpretations, leaving the occupants of magic lamps brooding behind folded arms, nostalgic for an era when well-wishers spoke carelessly, so that genies could openly engage in the malevolent manipulations usually. And this final one is one of the poems that was published in my book called The Long Train of Chaos from Kung Fu Treachery Press. And this one is, sometimes I take titles from song lyrics. This one comes from In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. It's called I've Seen Your Face Before, My Friend. Someone facing defeat might pull a knife out of their boot or a pin out of a grenade as a desperate last act. But that's nothing than a feud stripped down to its nucleus. What's dangerous is every overthrown oppressor finally facing the abyss of their empty conscience who only wants to talk. Because while I have never been present to hear what's been said when they do, I've seen those who have been so persuaded come within an inch of leaving hell's gates before turning and re-entering caverns filled with the sulfuric smoke of vague sentences containing everything. So I've brought this birthday cake with the saw inside for cutting your chains and wax on top for plugging your ears before you try to escape. Thank you so much. That's my time. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you very much, Paul Edward Costa. All right, up now is the inimitable Andrew Welch. Now, in addition to being an official town crier and disaster management lead for the Red Cross, Andrew Welch devotes significant energies to exploring and writing about human value systems and ecological economics. His first book, The Value Crisis, published in 2014, was enthusiastically reviewed by Alternative Journal as, quote, dizzyingly well-researched, a great reference on the ins and outs of economics, politics, finance, and the human condition, unquote. He is now polishing the follow-up to that book and will share from his work in progress. As you will soon hear, he's recognized for using engaging stories and conversational language to make big ideas accessible and useful to anyone who's curious about how to create a better world for themselves. Take it away, Mr. Andrew Welch.
Thank you, Harry. I should point out that the working title for this sequel to The Value Crisis is Trumping Our Survival, How to Change Course and Solve the Value Crisis. This is a little extract from that work in progress. Suppose you are walking in the woods and traversing a significantly muddy section of the trail, making traction quite slippery. You see a nice medium-sized solid branch on the side of the path. Perfect! A walking stick to help you keep your footing. You snatch it up and continue. As you reach the end of the muddy part, you see someone coming from the other direction. Looking at the muddy path, they say, "Hey, the path behind me is dry, but a walking stick would sure help me cross the part you just completed." Do you own that stick? What would be your response? You would probably say something like, no, I don't own this stick. I just picked it up from the side of the path. I don't think anyone owns it. It was just lying there. Perhaps if you had been on a path that crosses private land, it could be argued that the stick technically belongs to the landowner. But how is it that the landowner owns the land? Well, presumably they bought or inherited it from the previous landowner. But then how did they own it? Trace any land back far enough, and it can easily be proven that the very first owner of the land simply stole it from the community or the people who were already there, or nature, or humanity, or whatever. Before land was owned, a concept whose creation is attributed to ancient Rome, land didn't legally belong to anyone. When the Romans instituted land ownership, the concept of res nullius, Latin for nobody's thing, inevitably materialized around the same time. Res nullius was a law that stated anything without an owner could be just taken by seizure. It all had to start somewhere. Some philosophers propose that it is an appropriate natural law. That which has no owner can be taken by the first taker. And how do you know you're the first taker? Did you pick up someone else's temporarily carefully placed walking stick? Assuming you can overcome that minor stumbling block, the concept has its merits. If you need something that can be found in nature, isn't your claim as good as the next person's? Why cannot you just take that useful sharp-edged rock or firewood or fruit or game animal? Presumably, as for all other creatures of nature, this was the principle that worked just fine for our earliest ancestors. There is, however, one important distinction to be made. There is a difference between deriving benefit from the use or consumption of any unclaimed resource and deriving benefit from others simply by having that resource and calling it yours. The former is a legitimate necessity of life. The latter is termed charging an economic rent, taking from others for the so-called ownership of something which was never yours in the first place, without directly contributing anything to society. Another example of this is buying land on speculation, doing nothing with it and waiting for its value to rise. The value increase typically happens through the efforts of the rest of the community making productive use of the surrounding lands while being prevented from making that idle land productive. I not only question the right of anyone to charge rent or conjure up unearned profit on a natural resource that they claim to own, I question their claim to ownership. How could anyone be said to own any part of nature without resorting to a narrative that begins with an entirely arbitrary declaration? How does anyone make a rock formation or a stand of trees theirs? Let's be clearer on what I mean. For millennia, populations of any living group could be said to have territories, but that's not the same thing. The possibility and size of territories is dictated by the overall population and also by individual need. A territory is only yours so long as you are living there and asserting your claim. Territorial claims do not extend to resources there other than those needed for survival. And there are no transactions by which territorial privileges can be transferred to others, except perhaps for extensions to a mate or a family group. Territories cannot be rented, and their resources can be used, but not sold or destroyed as collateral damage for other extractions. There is no place in this value system for landlords, absentee owners, or excessive swaths of land for a tiny number of occupants. Much of the New World and the entire continent of Australia was stolen by a belief or an explicit declaration of terra nullius, that empty lands were up for grabs. Except that the lands were not empty at all. People had been living there for thousands of years. When this was questioned, the popular modification to the interpretation was that the land had not been substantially changed by its residents, so their presence didn't count. Apparently, unsustainable alterations were considered a prerequisite for ownership. As absurd as that might seem, there is some validity in thinking about the relationship between owning a resource and making improvements to it. Let's say that your stick was found, but not exactly perfect. What if you had to break off the pointy end and a few twigs? What if you even carved your name on the handle? It's beginning to feel a lot like you own that walking stick, isn't it? We'll leave it there.
Thank you, Andrew Welch. I'm first in line to buy that new book of yours, so put me down for one if you would, please. Up next, we have Robert Colman. Now, Rob Colman is the author of 3 books of poems, including Democratically Applied Machine, which was published this year by Palimpsest Press. He lives and works in Newmarket, Ontario. Please take it away, Robert Colman.
Thank you so much, Harry. It's great to be here. Can you hear me okay? Excellent, great. Well, I'm just going to read a couple of poems from Democratically Applied Machine. This is the very orange cover for you to see. Available through your library on Hoopla, if you like. One of the options. A lot of these poems have to do with manufacturing, and I'm the editor of a magazine for metal manufacturing, and so a lot of these were inspired by visits to factories across Canada, and this is one of those poems. It was actually the first poem I started to write, and the last poem I finished for this book. For whatever reason, it just took a long time to get to where it needed to be, but this is called Ghosting the Assembly Line. Watch the car's body trundled into place. Hands out. History. Quaint now, all those mouths that drawled parts, paychecks, dinners, flatware sets. As if our revolutions could still be fashioned, wrench on wrench, turned in unison. Take the minutes now, transcribe notes, penned up the line, white lab coats. Sketch the fingers that tool intention, lean Kanban black belts framed above large workstations, intricate knots, each in action, the clean line abstracting passion. The robots wave a greeting. Hear the hum, secondhand vibrato accents of the job shop floor. Work is done in smallness, one part, 4, more as required. As operator, accountant, time hoarder, one man a workforce awaiting the order, more like us every day, palms alighting on keyboards, milling down the hours into scrap. And the second poem I'm going to read is the League of Canadian Poets made a wonderful postcard of this a few years ago for their Poetry in Your Pocket series, and it's quite lovely. The artistry is amazing. I was really impressed by that, and thank you to the League for everything they do. This is called Whale Hunt. It was inspired by a visit to a factory, but it didn't turn into a sort of a factory poem. A guy held an airplane part in his hand, and he said, "If this breaks, you die." And I didn't appreciate that at the time because my wife was there taking pictures, and she's afraid of flying to begin with, so that didn't help me. But for some reason, it got me thinking about nature and whales, and it became this poem called Whale Hunt. Whale Hunt. We ask you to pull us further from land, harpoon snug in your side, seal bladder ballast above you. We ask after we leap from our boats and pierce your flesh, carry our skiffs as far as your might allows. Let me roll my bones, clack the dominoes back in place. There is not one Leviathan we do not love unto death. Who drew whom into the deeps? Wasn't everything necessity? I carved a compass on a scrimshaw box because direction was all I could think. Wind and current and your back as it breached. If I must now put away my blade, I would still follow you. All the tow ropes stretching unseen from bulwark and mast, cliffside and the gaff sail of earth pounded solid this doorway. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. Beautifully beautifully read. I love the way your rhythms and your voice really bring out those poems. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Before I bring up MJ, who will be next up, got a counterpart to Rico's happiness poem, because we all need a bit more pessimism during these times of anxiety and stress. So I thought I'd add a little pessimism to the mix, just increase the pressure a little bit. And the poem goes like this. I'd like to see that poetry saved me from myself. Sorry, I'd like to say that poetry saved me from myself in that delusional way we sometimes do, as if, having moved this far away from love, we are, any of us, in any way truly savable. The truth is much more contradictory in any case. Poetry did not save me from myself. Nothing can save me from myself. Someone once said, "Give me a word and I'll give you a world." But poetic words, once given, are no longer retractable. The horses of Calliope, untethered, roam freely, like viruses, become busy unmaking the planet. Maybe the only salvation is to try to unwrite the verses. Let the ink flow back into the pen. Let language lie fallow, silent in repose. And yet, I still continue to scratch these lines into the sere landscape of Gaia's soul, drizzle these words onto the whitewashed surfaces of the psyche, in the hopes that the world is, and I am indeed, savable, whether by poetry or protest or incoherent argument spattered with the blood of what history has shoveled at us from behind in the name of meaning. Now, up next is MJ Moores, and MJ Moores has been scribbling words onto the page since she was 9. But these days, she's getting paid for it. Thank God for that. She loves writing speculative fiction blended with romance and has recently dabbled in humorous urban fantasy. She can be found at mjmoores.com or on the shelves of the Orangeville Library. Welcome, MJ Moores. Take it away.
Awesome. Okay. So thank you very much for that, Harry. Yes, I have always been passionate about reading, and it was my grade 4 teacher that handed out an assignment, 2-page short story, and I decided to do an actual 10-page mini novella for her, and yeah, so I just haven't stopped writing since. Tonight, I actually would like to read an excerpt for you from my latest book, which is actually coming out on Monday. It's a novella, and it's called Red Line Drift. It is from my Flawed Attraction Romantic Suspense series. So without further ado, I will just jump right in. So I will get to the point. This is partway into chapter 1. Shell parked her smart car in the family garage of her grandparents' estate winery. The resort season wouldn't hit full force until the end of the week, but she knew better than to leave anything laying around. A host of regulars already stayed in the expansive main house, and it looked like some nosy Parkers had driven in on a whim. Guest vehicles were immediately valeted to the estate garage and did not sit out front. She left her light sweater in the car, grabbed her silver notebook, leaving the red one lying there, and headed for the house. The lecture halls on campus were notoriously chilly, especially in the late spring and summer when they put the AC on. She tucked the book tight under her arm. Voices filtered into the hall from the front office. Shell wiped her sandals on the rug and headed for the stairs. She ditched her shoes before going into her room. Guests were encouraged to wear flip-flops or slip-ons throughout the house. "Rochelle, a moment, please," her grandfather said. She gripped the railing and twisted to look at him as he stood in the doorway to his office. "Can I just drop my stuff off?" she motioned with her head up the stairs, pulling the notebook tight to her chest. "No, now. You're late. Come in, please." She was not late. Shell shouldn't have to remind him. She always studied at the library after class. She turned back into the office. He turned back into the office. She sighed and followed. Two men stood as her grandfather strode over to the sitting area. This is Detective Sergeant Gideon Maxwell. Gramps indicated the plain-clothes policeman with a practiced wave. The stately, black-haired gentleman with silver-peppered bands over his ears gave a nod. Oh, great. A private tour. Just what I need. Shell turned to his son sitting next to him. Calvin Klein, the pencil rescuer from earlier today, turned his honey-brown eyes on her. Well, that's weird. Maybe a tour won't be half bad after all. She smiled back. And this is Jackson Forrester, Constable Second Class. Was that him? Her smile faltered. She looked at her grandfather, confused. What the hell is going on here? She bit her tongue, knowing better than to say something like that in front of guests. Have a seat, Rochelle. I'll explain. Gramps leaned back and crossed his ankle over his knee. She perched on the edge of a leather chair, her heart pounding. Shell tucked her notebook onto her lap and licked suddenly dry lips. The police hadn't been called to the house since her senior year, and she was not up for a repeat performance. These officers believe we can help them with an ongoing investigation. Detective Sergeant Maxwell leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. He had kind eyes, but Shell didn't trust him. Hello, Rochelle. Everyone looked at her. Say something. Hello. We have a solid lead on a case we need to look into that stems from your grandparents' estate. We've traced several vehicles connected to a luxury car parts outfit as having stayed here for an extended period of time before noticing certain components went missing. Well, were traded out for low-end or aftermarket knockoffs. Shell turned to her grandfather. An all-too-familiar anger bubbled. I have nothing to do with this. How could you even think? That's not why you're here, Maxwell said. She locked gazes with her grandfather, trying to read the truth of the matter. She couldn't trust any of them, but at least she knew his tells. My dear, you are going to help them get close to the estate garage crew without tipping them off about police involvement. You can finally put those wasted theater skills of yours to use. Shell tore her gaze away and looked at Maxwell instead. I don't understand. Why do you need me? Just get someone to go undercover as a mechanic and be done with it. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. We don't want to spook whoever might be involved, and a direct, sudden change in staffing is a red flag to these people. You see, we're looking to infiltrate by proxy. They're already comfortable with you around, or so Mr. Rockwood tells us. If Jackson is gradually introduced to them as your boyfriend, they won't get suspicious, and he can look deeper into the situation with no one the wiser. Boyfriend? What are you talking about? Why wasn't I asked? What if I'm already seeing someone? Maxwell glanced at her grandfather. Stop being ornery, Rochelle. You haven't dated anyone in 3 years, and if you are seeing anyone, it's not serious enough for you to bring them around. He threw out the old ultimatum at her, on the verge of airing dirty laundry in the guise of an informed parental unit. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, MJ. Awesome as usual. Our next presenter is Rocco de Giacomo. Now, Rocco is a widely published poet whose work has appeared in literary journals in Canada, Australia, England, Hong Kong, and the US. The author of numerous poetry chapbooks and full-length collections, his latest, Brace Yourselves, is on the representation of the individual as it relates to the zeitgeist. It was published in January 2018 through Quattro Books. Rocco lives in Toronto with his wife, Lisa Chiofila, a fabric artist, and his daughters, Ava and Matilda. Take it away, Rocco.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. Okay, that's great. So I'm just going to read two pieces tonight. And one is from each from a different manuscript. The first is from a collection that's coming out with Guernica called Casting Out, and it is kind of a confessional about my experience kind of growing up in an evangelical household and slowly becoming becoming a humanist, or I say humanist when I want to be diplomatic, and I say atheist when I feel like having an argument. So tonight I'll say humanist. I'm going to read one piece that was kindly published in the latest latest edition of Prairie Fire. And the title is a quote from the Bible. "O my people, their oppressors are children, and women rule over them." Isaiah 3:12. It's backwards. Everything these days. Down is up is sideways, and my elder daughter refuses to flush the toilet afterwards, shouts, "No, I want you to look at it," before running off shamelessly giggling as my younger yells, "I want new milk," from the dining table, while I scramble around the kitchen in a t-shirt and tube socks, trying to customize their spaghetti dinners. The end times. Signs are everywhere. How many seals have been broken in this house alone as I peel candy wrappers and Play-Doh off my back? How many horsemen have knocked and turned their red faces from the uncomfortable sight of me in my underwear wrestling the dog for the screen door? And I said, "Come and see." And they looked at their watches and said, "Oh my, look at the time. We really have to be going." And really, in the news, the Earth is sliding further on its axis, faster than scientists can track. And I imagine roomfuls of partially bald men studying the numbers, staring worriedly out of adamant windows as the center of the universe slips slowly from under them. Thank you. Is something from my another manuscript, and it is kind of like the manuscript is kind of like the anti-confessional, or this one, because I've written, I believe, enough confessionals about myself, and I'm even sick of myself. And so this is a manuscript that focuses on connecting the purely biological to the astronomical. And this one is entitled "The Holographic Principle and/or a 17-year-old woman presents with extensive epidermal nevi." Imagine a birthmark. Raise it as high as a coin made of velvet. With one finger, spread it out like paint in spirals from the center of her back. On the front of her body, fan out these nevi in great V's that ascend her belly. Human beings rarely receive the truth complete and staggering, Anais Nin suggests. Instead, they acquire it cell by cell, a laborious mosaic of contrasts. A shoe falling into a black hole is not the same as a kettle falling into a black hole. Professors Hooft and Susskind raise their fists. The information that makes us unique cannot be erased from our universe. Alfred Blaschko, a skin doctor, alive a century earlier, isn't listening. He's begun to notice that the rashes and moles of his patients follow lines which don't correspond to any system of the body. The 17-year-old woman hasn't been born yet. She's been dead for 1 billion years. She is alive and naked before our lens, eyes and areola blacked out. Her jaw belies her restlessness, both rigid and a river running in multiple directions. Blaschko wants to escape. He's more interested in venereal disease, which is rampant in his time. But his name is caught in the current of her lines. The human codec, we are learning that both maps and braces the embryonic progression of our skin as it pools around us cell by cell. The truth in 6 billion letters. A handful of errors can expose Blaschko's hidden tributaries, voiced sometimes by extensive epidermal nevi. You, like the 17-year-old woman, would know more about human skin than most. You would be both the sunlight and the window made victim by a stray pebble. Your story would be of your flesh, webwork of your shadow flowing out across the floor. Rubbish, says Stephen Hawking. No word will ever escape. Thank you.
Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Thank you, Rocco. That was amazing, amazing writing. Really
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you. So we're going to move onward to Liz Jansen. And Liz Jansen, healer, author, and motorcycle aficionado and Orangeville resident. Liz Jansen combines her artistic mediums to create stories and experiences that inspire readers to embark on their own journey of self-discovery. No helmet or jacket required. Please welcome Liz Jansen. Take it away, Liz.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be talking about my latest book, which is a memoir called Crash Landing. My other book is Women, Motorcycles, and the Road to Empowerment. Both are available at Booklore. I thought that rather than reading an excerpt, I'm going to give you the background to Crash Landing. And Rocco, I feel we have some things in common, which I think will become apparent as I tell a little bit about my story. So from before when we're born, we're shaped by stories. And our cultures and our family tell us who we are and how we should behave and believe and perform in the world. So Crash Landing is my story. But how do we really know that these stories we live by, stories we're often not even aware we're carrying, are true? I was born on Mother's Day in 1954. The nurses cleaned me up, put on a pink ribbon on a strand of fiery red hair, fiery red at that time, and brought me to my mother. The conditioning had started. Girls wear pink. My parents loved me dearly and wanted the best for me. They took over from there and they did the best they knew how, nurturing and raising me according to the way they'd been raised and with those teachings, including the religious teachings. I was born into a Mennonite community where my family could trace my lineage back hundreds of years. It was a strong, tightly knit community, inured by hardship. My grandparents knew no shortage of hardships. They'd come to Canada in the 1920s, penniless refugees who'd survived a brutal civil war and years of terror, starvation, and pandemic. Their values were indisputable, but the religious teachings did not sit well with me. I became ashamed of my culture, never my family, moved away, and for more than 40 years kept my Mennonite past hidden from friends and coworkers. But the stories stayed with me. As I approached age 60, I had an increasing sense to explore my past. At that age, we realized there's more days behind us than ahead of us, and I really wanted to make the most of whatever time I had left and to use my gifts and talents wisely. And to do that, I knew that I had to understand who I was and answer the question, who am I? So even though I hadn't admitted and I had kept all these stories hidden from others, they were part of me. So I needed to explore that. I also believe that part of who we are and part of what shapes us is the land that we've grown up on and that our ancestors have grown up on. So I figured that if I could put myself in the shoes of my grandparents as best I could never understand what they went through. But if I could try and do that, walk the land they'd walked and go to the places where they first arrived in Canada, maybe I could understand more of their perspective and where their behaviors and beliefs and teachings came from and why they did as they did. So I did what I knew best. I got on my motorcycle and I headed west out into the open country. I expected to be gone for 8 to 12 months. I'm not going to tell all the story because this is where it picks up in Crash Landing now. So I expected to be gone. I was planning to go to northern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and spend quite a bit of time on the road exploring places that they lived, people who may have known them or families that may have known them. And that was really the impetus behind the book. I'll just say that it didn't start out to be called Crash Landing, but the crash is also a play on words because my grandparents crashed many times, as did my parents. Crashes don't just happen on motorcycles. And how they responded to that was how I was shaped. So as is often the case when we make ourselves available for a quest, it unfolds in ways we can't have imagined. They unfold on their own schedule. And so this was a profound adventure that I had. It took place over a few years, delivering answers and insights in ways I couldn't have imagined. So I'm going to leave it at that, except to read something that's on the front cover that came from Oriah Mountain Dreamer, who's the author of the invitation. Stories change us. Liz Jansen's story is both an adventure and a mesmerizing process of excavating the meaning, messages, and magic embedded in our everyday lives. Her journey is an invitation to be awake to the story of our lives and the lives of our ancestors is telling. And that kind of story heals the heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading that book when it's published. It sounds like an amazing.
It's published. It's available in book lore and the library. Yes, it's all there.
Okay, brilliant. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I bring on our last reader, I'm going to share a poem with you from a book that was published this year called Blue is Bigger Than Brown. It's available at Book Lore and other platforms. And this is also a response to Rico's happiness poem as well. This is called In the Event of True Happiness. In the event of true happiness, break glass with hammer, supplied. Extract guilt, supplied, and apply freely. Wrap chain, supplied, around neck. Tighten with insipid culture, supplied. Cut breath to lungs, cover over eyes. Spray body with numbing solution, supplied. Climb into mental box, supplied. Drape with mediocrity, supplied. Cut off lips, out heart, through brain. Dream of nothing, supplied. Care for nothing, supplied. Sell lips, heart, brain for profit, or eat as required. If true happiness persists, sit on sofa, supplied. Turn on TV, supplied. View screen until death arrives, supplied. Our last speaker, our last reader.
That's so good.
Our last reader is Claudia Ferraro. Now, Claudia is a 23-year-old poet from Collingwood, Ontario, currently acting as the town's poet laureate for the 2020 to 2022 term. She's in her last year of an undergrad in creative writing at Dalhousie University, with a focus on eco-poetry and metaphor as pedagogy. Please welcome Claudia Ferraro.
Hello. All right, sorry about that. Thanks for that introduction, Harry. I was just saying that I've been having so much fun listening to everybody speak tonight that I almost forgot I was sharing myself. But it has been a privilege to be in such good company. A lot of the writers tonight have been local inspirations and not so local inspirations of mine for a while now. So I feel very privileged to be here. So thank you for having me. I wanted to share two poems of mine tonight. The first one is sort of a naive poem inspired by my often awkward habit of succumbing to laughing fits in church, which I've yet to completely grow out of. It is titled So Silly. Oh my God. On Saturday night, I am a wild man, laughing at, licking at bubbles in brew and on you, boys. On Sundays, I always feel silly. Not silly haha, but more like sloppy silly, sickening silly, slack-jawed, big mouth, but nothing's coming out silly. It's always sunny on Sundays, even when it's raining. Even when everyone on the sidewalk is staring at me with two-toned eyes, and I'm wondering if it's obvious. Can they tell I don't know which foot I'm going to step with next? Or do they think I'm magic? It's silly when the woman breaks her heel. It's silly when no one stops to help her, hold her. It's silly when the dog takes a shit right where the woman's heel lays and the owner puts it back on the leash and apologizes, but still doesn't stop to help, doesn't know how to. I, too, don't know how to. So I step right in the dog shit and let the woman see. I take my bare foot out of my too high heel and smile, and she stares, and my face widens willingly while hers scrunches into a pile of dog shit, and it is so silly. Not silly haha, but sillier like a fool. Like I am a fool for you, your limp and lonely lifeline, if you'll let me be silly. On Sundays, all of the ha-has are serenading me, and I'm scared shitless. So I eat them, lick them, and taste them. Let them soak on my dry tongue like communion. I hope they belong to a greater deity, and this is just me getting to know them. Our first date will be this weekend. Like, maybe after a minute in my mouth, I will learn the name of the man who spoke and slipped me this particular ha. Not my father, but not a stranger. Or maybe a man with a woman he believed in, and a laugh he spent so severely on Saturday nights. A silly man. Slide on down the sidewalk, and if you look at me, I will make you step in it, Mr. Slick, Mr. Mine, Mr. Sick of this taboo and this wooable man. Thank you. All right, so my second poem I want to share, I actually wrote for the mayor's levy of the town of Collingwood this year, which also has to be virtual because of our circumstances. And so I shot this a couple days ago, and it was based on the theme of the mayor's levy this year, which is None of Us is as Strong as All of Us. And it is titled Sharing in Solitude. Last night, I made pasta for 20 and played musical chairs around my dinner table. I was the chef and the host and all of the guests, and I toasted my own survival. I toasted the way my body has grown to take up my entire kitchen, the way my words respond to themselves in silent conversation, and how my pores, like my screens, have opened up in acts of preservation. Last night, I found myself asking the branches of trees to become arms, to reach out, to grab me and tell me that solitude isn't always harmful, to remind me that its trunk and its leaves need space and rest to grow, while underground its roots are stretching, talking, building in a place unknown, eating with others and gaining the courage to be on this surface, all alone. Company can mean many things, but to me, right now, it means an entity, like how it can be 100 or a single one, but it's always quality over quantity. Take Christmas, for example, and the way Santa Claus comes all by himself, as if in order to shimmy down our chimneys, it didn't take an entire crew of elves. Quiet, invisible helpers are the backbone to his big belly, and many small hands, doing many small things, make solitude a little less heavy. Strength in numbers, stronger together, like how two people in love can be a shelter, like how many people can be a team in which the eye is no longer seen, like bodies fusing together to build a bridge, our bones melting to ensure safe passage, our minds meeting to learn a new language, our lips spilling love like it's our greatest privilege. Dropped off food and FaceTime calls are our modern nourishment. Because silence can feel like hunger. And loneliness isn't always absence, but a wave that pulls you under, asks you to swim alone, asks you to build a home, like it's made out of two hands and not the way that they roam for others to hold, a universal lost limb syndrome. So for our medicine, I prescribe opening a window, even if it's cold. Gather yourself in a blanket so heavy it traps your feet in the folds, and let the cold touch only your nose. Breathe in the winds of the cosmos, just so you know it's still there, just so you taste someplace else's air, just so you know there is something that we still all share. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Claudia Ferraro. That was wonderful. And thank you to all of our readers. Absolutely great work. Wordsmiths, all of you. And I'm going to actually pass it over to Lauren to either bring up questions that might be in the air or to wrap it all up. Over to you, Lauren.
Excellent. Thank you, Harry. I will just echo what you've said. That was fantastic. You were all so very, very talented. I am not a writer, but I very much enjoy listening to everyone else's writing, from poetry to novels. It's wonderful. Excellent evening. The only thing that would have made it better, perhaps, is being in person with all of you. But there's always next year. Fingers crossed. So thank you, everyone, for tonight. If anyone has questions, we're going to be sticking around a little longer, and we're happy to answer or just chat a little. You can unmute your mics now. Otherwise, have a great evening. We have recorded this tonight. I'm sorry, you're probably hearing my dog in the background. We have recorded this tonight, and we will be sticking it on our YouTube channel, so you can rewatch or share with your family and friends. And make sure everyone who was unable to attend gets to listen. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Lauren.